Probably she became 10% in your own community.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good evening. I will open up the November 13th meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board. It's about 4 minutes after 7. Tonight on our agenda, we have a public hearing for 601, 605, 609, and 613 Bay Road for a potential subdivision. We'll also be talking about the our master plan in terms of housing, the update to that. We'll have a discussion regarding the town's roadway acceptance policy. We'll be talking about our 2020 budget. We'll have a board discussion about future potential bylaw amendments. We'll review meeting minutes and have a few updates. So we will get started with Rick reading the public hearing announcement.
Okay. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 1V, Point B of the Town of Hamilton Subdivision Rules and Regulations, the Town of Hamilton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, November 13, 2018, at the Hamilton Town Hall, 577 Bay Road, Memorial Room, to review a definitive subdivision plan by Engineering Alliance, Inc. on behalf of subdivider Thomas Ford. The public hearing will commence at 7 p.m. The project consists of subdivision and reformation of parcels of land located at 601, 605, 609, and 613 Bay Road, also identified as tax map 49, lots 50, 20, 58, and 19. Applications and plans are on file and available for review at the Hamilton Planning Department during regular town hall business hours.
Thank you. Just so everyone knows, a number of meetings ago, the applicant had come before the board with a kind of a pre-application conference or meeting with us to just introduce this project to us and if we had any preliminary comments, but this is the public hearing for the definitive subdivision. So the board has seen this generally before. So we can, who's here representing the applicant? Sorry.
That'll be Rick Mitchell, and the applicant's here also.
Who?
Rick Salvo. Rick Mitchell, Rick Salvo.
Yeah.
One and the other.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, one second, Tom.
Tom, before you begin, please. Just to go on record, I'm an associate member of the planning board, and as such, I do not have a vote on subdivision products. I am also a resident of 613 Bay Road and affected by this potential project. So that said, I feel to maintain the integrity of the independence of the planning board in this process, I am recusing myself from this agenda item in discussion, and will return to the board on the next item.
Thank you, Chris.
However, I do reserve my right to speak as a citizen residing at 613 Bay Road, so I will just join the audience as a citizen.
Thank you. Tom?
Good evening, everybody. Tom Ford. I'm here with Heather. Rick's here. I think the Serafinis are walking through the door. All the people that are interested as participants are here. And quick overview, and then I'm going to hand it over to Rick Salvo, who's actually going to do the technical presentation here. What you're seeing is the exact same plan that you saw about 10 weeks ago, which would create one new additional lot behind the Serafini's current homestead, and would essentially eliminate the ambiguity of the man cave, 605 Bay Road, and the resultant lot that came behind it. Several lots are being altered by this plan. My lot will be increased by a little bit. The lot out back will be changed a small bit. The man cave lot, 605 Bay Road, will become a conforming lot with respect to both area, frontage, and the circle test. And in a very slight way, Chris's lot will be altered to accommodate the rounding at Bay Road and give him a little additional space adjacent to mine. At the end of the day, what we'll end up with, I hope and expect, and I hope you will agree, is a small private drive that will not be an encumbrance to the town, but will be maintained by the lots that abut it. We've managed to call the subdivision Bayfield because we thought it needed a name, but in fact, there are enough existing house lot numbers on Bay Road that we can make that happen without introducing a new street, particularly one that would conflict with the current Bay Road. So, having said that, I'm going to let Rick Mitchell walk you through the particulars.
Salvo.
Rick Salvo. Rick Mitchell back again. Yeah.
You're trying to get me into trouble.
I'm so sorry.
right?
That's right.
Got an alter ego. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Rick Salvo with Engineering Alliance, office at 194 Central Street in Saugus, Mass. The plan that you see before you is the existing conditions plan. As Tom referred to, there are currently 1, 2, 3, 4 residential dwellings that are shown on these 1, 2, 3, 4 lots that exist today. If we start at the top at 613 Bay Road, this is tax map 49 lot teen. It's comprised of 26,199 square feet. Behind it, 609 Bay Road, tax map 49 lot 58, comprised of 37,683 square feet. What Tom referred to as the man cave, what is number 605 Bay Road, is this large parcel, tax map 49 lot 20. It's comprised of about 2.5 acres. And then 601 Bay Road, tax map 49 block 50, comprised of 2.04 acres. Each one of these lots, with the exception of 609 Bay Road, gets their access off of Bay Road. Down 605 enters down this common driveway that terminates way up here. Was my understanding it was intended to service another dwelling that may be built in the rear at some point. The historic district I have shown in this red line here. The limit of the historic district bisects lot 50, then runs along the property line between lot 50 and lot 20 to the rear of the property, and then turns and heads in an easterly direction. So the majority, or half of the development, as you'll see, at least the dwelling construction, will be located within the historic district, and a portion will be outside of the historic district. If I switch over to the lotting plan here, this is the same lotting plan that is in your packet, but I've colored it up. So the two lots that are shown in red, lots 3 and 4, are the two new building lots that will be the result of this particular subdivision. As you know, we need to create a proposed roadway with a cul-de-sac turnaround to create frontage for all those parcels. So lot 1 has a slight increase in area. Lot 2, which is Tom South 609 Bay Road, has a slight increase in area. Lot 3 gets created completely conforming. Lot 4 gets created completely conforming. And Lot 5, with the circle that fits back here, now becomes a conforming lot with the requisite area, frontage, and now meets that circle test. And then the remaining lot on lot 6 is the only lot, which is 601 Bay Road, that has a significant amount of area taken out of it. Gets basically cut in half. It's a little over an acre, 46,383 square feet. So all these lots that are created all meet the zoning criteria, and like I said, it really results in one new building lot. This was always intended to be built on the rear half of 605 Bay Road, and then this would be the new lot. So at most, 2 new houses can be built on this property. If we take a look at the plan and profile, similar to the project that we worked on down the street about 1.5 years ago, The intent was to create, you know, a sort of de minimis, not a super highway, not a ton of pavement, but really something that just services as a common driveway. We did widen this one out a bit wider than the prior proposal on the other Bay Road property. I think when we had a discussion with the board a few months ago, we had said that we were going to put in a 22-foot wide road, which is what you see here today. This is a 22-foot wide road with a hammerhead style turnaround. We did prepare a plan that proved that the ladder truck has enough room to be able to turn around, and this given the 25-foot radii and the 22-foot wide width. If you look at the roadway profile, and there's really not much to see, we're basically staying at the same grade. This roadway, you can see, isn't perfectly centered in the right-of-way. And the reason why it's not perfectly centered in the right-of-way is we're trying to utilize as much of the existing driveway that I showed you on the existing conditions plan, so as to not create a whole bunch of new pavement out there. So there's a slight widening. We hold the edge, actually, of the existing driveway, and then we widen it out a little bit on either side to achieve the 22-foot wide width. We have a high point right about this area here. So from this area back, all the stormwater from this roadway stays within the roadway. We've created a roadway cross-section, which I'll show you in a moment. That's a typical crown, 1/4 inch per foot in either direction, which leads to a swale on either side. And we have a series of dry wells in front of the property and midpoint of the property that will capture the stormwater created by the roadway and direct them into those dry wells. You can see all the green around here. These are all the existing trees. Part of the wiggling in the right-of-way was to try to utilize as much of the existing pavement as possible. The remainder of the wiggling was to try to get around as many trees as we could so as to not have to clear cut this thing. So we want to keep most of the existing trees, especially where we're not really changing the grade of the road. That said, we're only proposing 3 new trees on this development because the intent was to keep all the existing growth that's there rather than cutting down that growth and planting new trees. We thought that seemed to be a better approach. If I switch real quick here to the roadway cross-section, we have 2 11-foot lanes, which make up the 22 feet, crown in the middle, 1/4 inch per foot, small swale on either side, and those dry wells that you see are located at the low points of those swales. So that's the way the roadway cross-section maps out. This is the development sort of superimposed on the aerial. So you can see the existing dwellings here and how the roadway kind of fits in and sort of matches up with the existing roadway that's there. You also will notice on the cover sheet that there's a significant amount of waivers that's been requested. These waivers are really just a means to get from a large subdivision roadway that's intended to service a whole bunch of homes down to more of a common driveway and sort of be as de minimis as possible. I'm not going to go through the waivers one by one, but I think if anyone has any specific questions about any of the waivers, I'd be happy to discuss them. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory. I think with that, that's basically how the development lays out. And I think at this point, I turn it back to the board for any questions or comments that you have.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Any questions from the board?
Two easy ones. When do you plan to start construction? When do you plan to be finished by?
I can answer that.
Knowing Tom, he's probably already started construction, but no, I think it'll probably be in.
It's the middle of November. Approval contingent, we'd start in the spring. The houses, we have some interest already in the lots. I'm not intending to build both of them. I would build one of the two. So it would be calendar year 2019, I think.
Thank you.
Patrick, I just have a question. I saw an email from, I think it was Phil Stevens regarding the Hammerhead.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I see Phil, Chief Stevens, back there in the crowd. He had some comments that they did want to see the regular turnaround at the end. So rather than speak for the chief, Phil, would you want to come up?
What we were looking at is trying to keep this as the circle, because hammerheads we have a real problem with. They turn into driveways, people park in them, and if we do have to get fire apparatus in, sometimes we have to get it in beside. And with snow and everything else, a lot of times it gives us even a bigger problem. So we prefer to have the circle.
Tom?
Yeah, we heard about this today, and Rick Salvo was good enough to do this. So we'd already, do you want to see this, Chief? Yeah. We'd already considered the radius. Now, this is different than a completely paved radius, which we have done on Farrington and Pride's Crossing and a couple other places in town. Prefer to do a circle if we're required to, as opposed to a big paved heliport, which is what Farrington Lane and Pride's Crossing look like, which would still allow you to do the circle.
I'd have no problem with that, because we could still come around and another truck could come behind it and
Yes.
get around.
Yes. We also, Heather and I have talked about putting a circle in front of our house. This might be more palatable to the chief, but no matter what, I'm sure we can figure it out. Yeah.
So you're amenable to that modification?
I'm amenable to that or whatever. Oh, sorry.
I am, yes.
Okay. Well, both of you have to agree, so that's...
As long as we both agree.
Yeah, yeah. In my opinion, accounts significantly less.
So the tree, one of the three trees is in that circle, right on the edge of it, sort of. It's not going to impede that at all?
We relocated over there. So there'd be one here and one here.
Okay, that's what I see.
Yeah, you don't have this plan yet, but we just.
Oh, I thought that
we
was-
just, yeah, we just developed this plan today, after we received the comment, just to see what it would look like, and the intent was maintain the 22-foot wide width all the way around, especially where it can be a one-way circulation around there. There should always be plenty of room to be able to get around. Like the chief said, you could get at it from either side. So keeping the landscaping in the middle seemed to be a good.
Oh, okay, that is different than this then.
It is, yeah.
Okay,
What
I
you're
get it.
looking at is this plan right here,
Yeah,
which shows this.
okay.
And this plan changes it to a full cul-de-sac with a landscaped island in the middle of it.
Any other?
Thank you.
Have you perked the area? And or done test bits where you're gonna put those dry wells? Because dry wells only work if the water has somewhere to go.
Yeah, we haven't perked the location of the drive wells. We have perked these two lots. The perk results were consistent with the perk results for all these lots, or I should say this one and this one. So we can certainly do tests there, but we're gonna get the same 7 minutes an inch that we got the other ones. The soils were very favorable in this area.
And where was the water table?
I don't recall.
We never hit it. Most recently, we did the new lot that we're creating, and we never hit it at 12 feet. I think the one thing that's a little bit missed is the alteration of the existing lots, which you're probably entitled to know. The Shepherds are giving up the rounding at Bay Road, And they're picking up a little bit of land area right there.
Right here. Yep.
But they've given up that. The Fords are picking up a little bit of area to the rear of their lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Serafinis clearly are bisected essentially, right, about an acre. The underlying zoning in this whole neighborhood is 20,000 feet. I think all of the lots that we're creating are almost 40,000.
The frontage requirement is 125 for this type of zoning as well. And that plan definitely adheres to that requirement and surpasses it.
Ed, do you have a comment?
This is more of a request, but going to the traffic flow in the cul-de-sac at the end, it would be appropriate if that bullseye of the cul-de-sac was left hard material. You could plant grass, you could plant low shrubs or something. So if a fire truck needed backing room, it wouldn't, as opposed to a big elm tree there. Just, it would probably be easier. You'll be bringing in some gravel and stuff. Just keep it hard. Doesn't mean that because if there were a fire there, you got a truck going this way and a truck going that way and so forth, so they don't have to worry about large plantings.
Yeah, well, Ed, you'll relate to this. It's also the place that the snow gets piled. When you're coming in that long straight thing, that's where the snow gets pushed up, and then they do around the circle. So I think it's the right thing, and recalling that the people that abut the cul-de-sac will have the responsibility of the snow and the sanding and all the rest of it. Easy is good.
Any other board comments? Comments from the audience? Please. Yeah, podium, please. Just state your name and your address.
Jim Brayo, 610 Bay Road, immediately across from the proposed road. First off, the plans I studied in Town Hall doesn't appear to be the same ones that are presented here in so much as. First off, from my concern is where exactly is the road going to be placed as it intersects Bay Road. That's not depicted on the plans that are up there. There's a proposed 22-foot wide and staying within a right-of-way easement, but it's not depicted. So I can't really answer or ask a specific question other than it would have been nice to have maybe chalk marked out where the road's going to be, what the actual radiuses are going to be, how it's going to look. So that's my first concern. It's not really available to the public until you just show up at this meeting. Second, we live in a historic district. My wife will probably address most of the issues, but first and foremost, we've addressed this issue 20 years ago with this similar presentation, and the historic district had a major voice. And I don't know, is there anyone here from the historic district? Were they invited? And have they issued a certificate of appropriateness? We have indications here from Donna McKenna, who weighed in on issues like this, where a new road is something to be considered in the historic district. Past precedence goes to the church. So the fact that they're not included in the decision making and they don't get to weigh in, I'm curious because I know Mr. Ford is definitely aware of that requirement. So why he didn't bring it to your attention and why you haven't asked that question yourself leaves me, I'm confused why it's not brought up. Specifically, excuse me. is this a as-of-right subdivision in and of itself, requiring nothing from you other than the variance listed on requested waivers? So in other words, if you give them all these waivers, your opinion is that it's an as-of-right subdivision? That's a question I have. Obviously, the fire department has weighed in on this hammerhead issue. And I would like to specifically know the existing driveway that's there. I'd like to know exactly where it's going to lay out. It's proposed, it's currently 16 feet wide now. It has a small radius as it intersects Bay Road. It has a specific elevation that the cars, as they exit at night, shine lights directly into my living room. There's a power pole there. Curious if that's getting relocated. There's no details as far as curbing. And as the radius goes into that street, how far, if any, curbing goes. And is the existing water main, is that adequate? Is it, or are they going to have to replace that? The issues as far as safety are concerned, you know, we've long had to deal with the parking issues with respect to the Congregational Church. We are in agreement, that church and myself, that there's to be no parking there. However, there are times when that is ignored, and we have to address that individually with the church, but it puts us at risk. Nowhere in the historic district is there a street that intersects a driveway, creating a four-way intersection. Nowhere. You won't find it. We're in a historic district, so that would set a new precedence. Are you intending to put any overhead lighting? And then also, with respect to, you know, you're by permitting this subdivision, by permitting this roadway, and on wherever it's going to be located, is there any remediation as to addressing the lights in our house? Okay, and you can see right now, you know, since 6 o'clock at night, it's dark, and it's dark for the next 12 hours. Every time someone pulls out of their driveway, intentional or unintentional, the lights go to our living area. I've already tried to offset this myself by moving the driveway. And then that would be the historic district. So I think my wife's got a few things to add. We have a history of 20 years of dealing with this issue, and I know one of the things she's going to ask is, why is Mr. Ford not building on one lot? We suspect we know why, but we want a final plan. We want to know that this is the end of the building. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
My wife, Paula.
Do you have any answers to any?
Well, I was going to have the applicant address some of those questions that they can. I mean, in terms of, you know, location of the roadway, I mean, it's shown kind of, it's just, you know, obviously not to mention at this scale, but about exactly where it's coming out, what the distance is with the radius.
I'm going to take a pass at it, and then when I goof up, Rick Salvo is going to correct me. But the road, both the current one and the proposed one, are shown on the plan exactly. And what we did as a accommodation to Chris was we set the far side of the road exactly right where it is, the paved, and we're adding the 6 feet of new pavement up against the building that I currently own, Man Cave, 605 Bay Road. The road that comes out now comes out almost exactly opposite the Breault's driveway, which they were concerned about before when we did this. The new road will come out in almost exactly the same place, particularly if you're exiting on the right side of the road, you're going to be in the exact same place. If you're entering the subdivision, you're going to be closer to the man cave. The plans that are on file at Planning Office and the plans that you saw tonight are exactly the same, with the only exception of the cul-de-sac, which we created to accommodate the chief's concern, which we received today. There's no lighting plan for the road. The concerns of the Historic Commission, we've dealt with them for a decade. The house at the Shepherd's house was subject of considerable review when it went through. The man cave, we were able to demolish a piece that was not deemed historic, and we kept the front building, the blue building, which is historic. My own house is 100% reviewed by the Historic Commission, and the house in the back that has never been built received 100% review by the Historic Commission, and I think Steffi was on the board for almost all of that. The fences are not subject, the colors are not subject. We've been through this a few times. It's about the architecture, and I'm going to recall a conversation with Tom Catalano, who wanted the last house perpendicular, parallel to the street, the main access, and he said, but given what you've done there, I think you've earned a few chits. I think we've been very respectful of the historic district, and I think part of the nicest part of Bay Road now is the work that I've done to rehab those buildings that currently exist. With respect to Jim's comment that there's no place on town where a road comes out opposite a driveway, I beg to differ, because you just approved one at Bridge Street and the 2 lots that are across the street from that. That's exactly the situation. That's not a road, it's a double driveway. I don't think his situation personally is exacerbated one iota by one additional house, of which he sees exactly one additional house's traffic coming out opposite his driveway, not opposite his living room, opposite his driveway. But I'm glad to talk.
One of the questions was, will you require a new water main?
No, and we did that with the DPW. When we came across, we had put a 2-inch water main in to support the lot in back, and no water main extension or improvement is required. There are 2 fire hydrants. The chief will attest to this, within 200 feet either way.
Okay, so the existing infrastructure will support any new homes?
Truthfully, the only thing I don't know is the size of the transformer. I think it was put in there for 1 house. It's going to have to be upgraded for 2, but nothing changes.
Okay, great. And Patrick, the question was, if we approve this with waivers, what's the disposition?
With waivers, you simply create the decision calling out the waivers that you agree to based on the list of 17 that they have.
Right.
You could do it, you know, as a compilation, just referring to the plan, or you could call out the ones you want.
So when and if those waivers are approved, then it's approved. It's an approved subdivision.
If the board so approves it, yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, you're only approving the access and the frontage for the subdivision. You're not approving the lots within the historic district. That still has to go through that process.
Right. So this is still subject to the Historic Commission's review.
That's right. There's no such thing as a by right subdivision. As you know, all subdivisions require a planning board approval. So.
Okay, good. I think that answers the questions you asked.
I did check with the DPW director. He has confirmed that the existing 2-inch water main is adequate.
Were there any other questions we didn't address? Please.
I'll do a little cleanup on some of Jim's questions and also ask some of my own. My question
Can you state your name? I'm sorry.
Paula Jesmondo, and I live at 610 Bay Road, which is, again, right across from the proposed road. my questions are in two directions. One is back 20 years ago when Tom proposed the existing, do you call it a subdivision? I don't know what it's called. But, you know, we went through a long process, and my memory at the time was that he didn't have the right to build it because he lacked a turning radius or something like that. And waivers were given to him to build this limited few houses. And it went on for years. I don't know if all of you remember, but the negotiation of what was going on there, which was simultaneous with what was going on with the church building, went on for years. And we met with Tom, Jim and I met with Tom and agreed that the intersection, the proposed intersection of his driveway and where our driveway was at the time was unsafe, not aesthetically appealing, and that the lights were an issue. So we agreed that we would move that he would pay us to move our driveway and make some lighting adjustments. There was a caveat in our contract that said that if his project were changed in scope, that he was not necessarily bound to pay us after the appeal period. We went ahead and moved our driveway in accordance with, it cost more than what we had agreed on, but we did that. I also officially wrote a letter on behalf of me and Jim to the planning board withdrawing our objections and telling them that with the existing driveway with the driveway Tom was proposing at its 16 feet, offset by our driveway, that we were satisfied, and I withdrew our objections. And I have to tell you, coming to these things is really upsetting. It's very upsetting, and I stopped coming. I withdrew our objections. I was called by Evelyn Schuman numerous times in that process to come and renew our objections, and I said, I made a deal, and I'm living by my deal. And the day that this project, as it is right now, got approved, I called Tom. I said, we're good, right? And he said, no, I'm not honoring it because I was knocked down a house from the proposal. And so I came here, and I didn't say anything because it was a done deal. And that's how things have been. Going back to the point, it's dangerous. And we are affected by those lights, and it was acknowledged by Tom back then. And now when he's widening that road, we're back where we were. And it's just not fair. It's like continual bites at an apple. It's like he wasn't entitled to the first subdivision. Now he's getting a bigger one that he's not entitled to. And here's our big concern. I'm assuming, where is this subdivision?
That's the existing.
I'm just assuming that, here it is. This is the lot that won't get built in order to access someday, potentially, the pool property and do a big old U-ey that dumps a whole bunch of houses out on me. And it's just like one bite after another bite after another bite. And it's not fair to the house across the street. Now, regarding my husband's point that you don't have a driveway, a road running into a house or a driveway, the Bridge Street intersection isn't relevant because those are new houses. We're talking about we live in an existing historic home. When you put a new road across from that, that's different, that's new, and that doesn't exist in the historic district, in addition to the safety issues. And it's just kind of rude and onerous to put on one property that all these lights, I mean, I get it, we're saying it's just one more house. It's just one more house. And maybe that's the case, but maybe not. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 10. So it needs to be considered from our point of view. Also, in addition, with regard to safety, I mean, some of you were here when we went through the church thing. We had a traffic study. It was totally unsafe and not allowed under the law to have all that parking It's 35 or 40 miles an hour in front of our house. You got all that parking. I almost got clipped today because Tuesday mornings is, I think, playgroup or something there. Every Tuesday morning, the cars are parked there. Every Sunday, they're parked there. And you try to pull out of my house, going left or right, with all those cars, even when the church remembers to put out the cones, which they're pretty good about on Sundays and not very good at all on Tuesdays. And you can't see anything. And so now I'm going to be looking at a road, cars parked on either side of my driveway, 35 miles an hour. People are blaring their horns at me. I can't see. I've got my 5 kids coming in and out. We can't see. So now you're adding an obstacle. Now I've got oncoming traffic. You know, is it just one house? We can, you know, one house, okay. But where's it stop? Lastly, I want to talk about the Historic District Commission. And the fact that because Tom dealt with the Historic District Commission in 1998 doesn't mean that the Historic District Commission has deemed this current proposal historically appropriate. And I have a memo to Tom Catalano, who was the head of the Historic District Commission back in '98 until recently, from Donna McKenna regarding Tom's proposal back in 1998. Most of this memo refers to the Whitmore House and the Trussell House, which were both renovated by Tom with the agreement of the Historic Commission. But one of the paragraphs is about the road. And it says, and this is Donna's opinion, the commission has the authority to review and approve or disapprove the construction of the new road in the district. She cites the law, and it says, structure means a combination of materials other than a building, including a sign, fence, wall, terrace, walk, or driveway. Those signs, fences, walls, those are not governed by our bylaw, but roads are. While the town bylaw exempts driveways and similar structures from the purview of the commission, a new road is not a similar structure to a driveway. That's what Donna says. The commission took this position when reviewing the design and construction of the access road to the parking lot for the Congregational Church. The Historic District Commission needs to weigh in on this. They need to talk, I remember John talking very succinctly and convincingly about the toothscape in the historic district and how does a big road like this affect that, a big road emptying into my house. Now, you know, I know it's at this moment we're talking about 6 feet more, but it can grow. So anyway, that's where I stand.
Thank you. You want to address any of that, Tom?
Yeah, please. You all are familiar with the work I've done across the street at the formerly the Yellow House, the Gray House. Changed the color, dropped the fence, rebuilt the stone wall, repositioned the stone wall. All those things were done without the purview of the Historic Commission. I think they were done well, but it's quite explicit in the Historic Commission guidelines that fences and site works are not included, nor is anything that is not visible from the road. Been pretty careful about moving through the Historic Commission whenever it's appropriate and doing right by the look of Bay Road. The driveway that's currently existing provides frontage for my house and never received Historic Commission review. The Breos were active in mine, but my memory is somewhat different from theirs in that my original proposal was 20,000, 25,000 square foot lots and quite a few more of them than was ultimately approved, which is 2. At the time, they had legitimate concerns, and I'm going to bring it up because she brought it up. I had offered to rebuild the fence in front of the house. I had offered to reglaze the front of their house. I had offered to remove the driveway and all those things that were an issue to her when it was a more dense subdivision. Even at that time, it wasn't accepted. It was, no, write us a check. So I don't believe that the motivations here are entirely about the impacts of my subdivision, but rather about economic win. What we're doing here is adding 5 feet to an existing driveway, which I'm well pleased not to do if this commission deems it extra, but I think it's the right thing, and we purposely moved it entirely off of the Shepherd's property, and this roadway will pass within about 11 feet of the man cave, which in the current scheme will be a standalone house. So if that house can have incoming traffic 5 feet off of the kitchen window, which we designed, I don't think the Braille's concerned about an occasional car coming out opposite their driveway, not opposite their house, opposite their driveway, should be a real concern. Oh, and Paula's concern is a real one, because in previous times I had conversations with Ed Poole about buying his property immediately adjacent to me out to the left. Ed and Oski, Ed's passed. Oski is not at all interested. Frankly, fullness of time, I'm not at all interested, and I'm willing to accept a covenant from you that I think Chris would be in favor of, saying no further subdivision on this property or no access to any other adjacent land.
You would agree to not expand this subdivision and not put more houses on using that road?
Absolutely.
That's a huge relief to us. That really is. Just in regard to our negotiation with Tom in the past, I have our letters that went back and forth, and they have dates on them. If you want, you can compare them to the proposal that was in front of you at that time. What I said was right. Yes, it did start out a bigger subdivision. When we came to our agreement, it was basically the subdivision that is the number of houses that you have before you now. Regarding how close this road comes to the Whitmore house, that's owned by Tom. What does he care? He's getting all these, so he can sell that house for, I don't know, a little, maybe it's going to be less money because it has a road right beside it, but it's his house. So, like, that's not a comparable argument to say that the impact on us. And just so you know, the driveway looks right into our living room. The lights come right in. That's all. That's just the truth.
Yeah, that's a discernible fact. Going for a walk.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Chris?
Chris Shepherd, 613 Bay Road. Just wanted to address my neighbors. I have been working with Tom in regards to the my fears or your fears in that in creating a wider road, it opens us up to what could perhaps go behind the pools. And Tom has indicated on several occasions the same thing he said tonight. And to be honest with you, it's my P&S that is the transaction that creates the bigger road. And that's I think where it gets addressed. I defer to lawyers.
Is it your P&S?
We don't have P&S yet. So, but that's, I'm anticipating that sort of covenant being a driver to signing the P&S.
Any other comments?
Question for Ed. Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot, Ed, but would you be comfortable as the chair of the Historic District Commission with this project as it's designed, with the circle at the end as Chief Stevens had requested?
cul-de-sac is easily defined, and I don't have any problem with a cul-de-sac, and the, having a cul-de-sac rather than a hammerhead is very understandable. The location of the road where the neighbors are, there's a lot of this that the Historic District Commission, the Historic Commission has not had this on its plate in the recent times. I don't mean to imply that conversations and discussions of 5, 6 years ago are unimportant. I think they are. My immediate feeling is that I think some time has got to be taken where we do a walkabout, public, private, and I'm having a difficult time putting this proposed roadway, marrying it to Bay Road successfully without some time and some thought and some input. I would encourage taking the time to do it correctly, listen to the parties that are out there speaking. There's, these folks that have spoken here tonight. I've never heard from them before, but that doesn't mean that it's inappropriate. It just means that the timings of the paths of this venture haven't crossed yet. So I think it's time to take the time to do it correctly. And
could I ask? Hold on. Ed, were you speaking for yourself as a member of this board, or were you speaking as a member of the Historic Commission?
How about both?
Well, it's important that we define the dividing line.
Well, there's been no application to the Historic Commission.
Right.
So that's fait accompli. That means that we've got to address that. And I cannot speak for the board.
Right.
We have an excellent board, highly intelligent, highly skilled.
And good-looking, too. And good-looking, too.
Yeah, thank you. And taking the time to do it correctly so that we can satisfy as many people that need to be satisfied, the public generally, and I think a beginning would be a meeting at the job site, the proposed site, both of the Historic Commission and at least members of the Planning Board.
For what exactly?
I'm sorry?
For what exactly? In terms, you mentioned how the driveway, roadway intersects Bay Road was your concern.
I don't understand.
Well, I guess what do you want people to specifically look at while we're there, if we do
well,
that?
They're mentioning headlights in his living room. I'm having a hard time because his living room doesn't show on the plan.
No, I understand.
I'm having a hard time, and I'm not being critical of the plan. The plans, myself, and I think those people who eventually rule on this, the Historic Commission as well as the Planning Board, need to take that time to find out where is his living room and where are the lights going to come into.
Right. I see your point. I hear your point. I guess mine would be, it's already there, serving essentially 3 homes, right? And it's getting wider at Bay Road, and having the proper turning radii and so forth for a new road, but it's already there. and there's going to be another, house or two back there. So I guess, is it worth all that, giving, and I'm not downplaying anybody's concerns, but is it, do we need to do that out there versus just here with the plan? Given the road's there, we know where it is, we've all seen it. Is it, I'm just asking that question of you and of the board. If we think that, if a joint meeting or if, even or a drive-by even is satisfactory for that. If the road wasn't there, if there was nothing there, I completely understand and agree. But given the fact that it's there and has served 3 houses for a number of years, what are everyone's thoughts on that?
Can I ask a question that's related to that?
Yeah.
Given that the road has been there for some time, has the police chief weighed in at all with any change in the safety factor? I don't think so. Because you're making this wider, you're putting curves on it. I mean, just the horns. Okay, so it's better than it was.
It's going to be better entering Bay Road.
No. And most of the traffic, I've got to assume, is going to be during the day or early in the morning and at around supper time. After that, the lights go away because people don't do that much moving around it after time.
No, and the point I would make is that the side that an exiting set of headlights
doesn't change. We've been very careful.
Right where it was before.
We held this edge and we're widening it in this direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so the exiting lights don't
change.
Yeah.
Don't change at all.
Yeah, personally, while I understand the concerns about the lights, this is an existing condition and has existed for 20 years, and the change is not going to exacerbate it, other than there's going to be possibly 2 or 3 more cars exiting and entering that roadway. So I don't personally see a need to go back there and look at it. I mean, I think there's enough history here. We know what's there. This property went through a long and tortured process 15 years ago. I remember I was just joining the board, and Tom had been through 5 bouts of housing court trying to get the planning board to see his point of view, and they didn't, and finally he decided that it was time to move on. And I remember said, I'll be happy to approve Tom's proposal as long as he takes those damn plywood boards off that house. And they disappeared. So we've come a long way since then. So I don't see the need to we're sort of revisiting this.
That's the existing driveway right here, beginning of it. So you can see, I don't know if you can see that from where you're sitting.
Can you please come back up? Thanks. Oh, can you come back up? Thanks.
Just 2 quick things. I think as we age, we move around less at night, and maybe we only have 1 or 2 cars for if we're empty nesters. But young people drive a lot, and families like ours can have 5 cars, and there can be a lot of traffic at night. So just so you know, there can be a lot of lights. Secondly, would the board consider putting a note on the plan that there could be no further extension of the road, or no, as Tom suggested, that he might be willing to agree to?
I don't have an issue with that.
And I don't have an issue with that. I don't have an issue with it being in the deed.
Right. Yeah, that's the place you want it.
So, and once again, Jim Braille, 610 Bay Road. I'm still not clear on the historic district. They're weighing in on this. Is it not appropriate for them to issue a certificate of appropriateness with respect to this proposal?
Is it
for the houses?
No, it's more. Donna McKenna says it's more than the houses. Donna McKenna, our town council, says a new road has to be addressed by the Historic District Commission. So it's not just about the houses.
Well, it's not a new road.
Yes, it is. That's a driveway. This is a road.
Okay. So we're going to have a difference of opinion here. This is an expansion of an existing roadway by 5 feet. So it's not as if it's, and as Brian said, if this were a new road, we'd certainly have a lot bigger concern about this. It's an extension of an existing right-of-way and roadway to properties that are already being served by this roadway. So it's not a new road. It's a modification of an existing road.
I disagree. You're using words that aren't specifically defined. This now becomes a street in the town of Hamilton. It does not
No,
become...
it does not. No, it does
Totally
not.
different
It's a
situation.
private way.
It's a private way,
A 16-foot private way.
22-foot private way.
It's currently 16 feet.
I know what it is,
Right.
but I'm,
Okay, then 16 plus 6 is 22. So you're adding 6 feet to it in the direction south. Okay. My question originally was, these are things that have to be addressed according to Donna McKenna, whether it was 20 years ago or 20 days ago, past precedents, the historic district has to weigh in on it. They have an obligation. Now, my question is, will the historic district take a look at this?
Actually, I'd like to make a comment first. The fire chief still here? Were you requesting it go to 22 feet from 16 feet?
We didn't request it, but we
Prefer it?
like that.
Right, okay, so if I was in the Army and you were in the Army and you like something and I'm your subordinate, it gets done, right? Okay, I think the fire chief would overrule the Historic District Commission. I think the point is moot. It's a safety factor, not a historic factor. So therefore, I don't see any need for that point to go to the Historic District Commission.
Will the Historic District Commission review this project?
That's not up to me. I have no
They'll
idea.
review the
I'm not on-
homes.
But
Potential
do you understand, it's more than the homes, it's what's views, it's, the road is part of the project.
I think we understand that, and we have a different point of view, and that doesn't mean that you're wrong, but I'm taking a different point of view, and I think others are as well. It's an existing roadway. Those issues were all addressed 20 years ago when this project came up, and were opined by the town council and the Historic District Commission and the Planning Board at that time. So to me, this is a minor modification of an existing roadway. So that's my personal opinion.
I agree.
Okay.
Another element of this, too, is the fact that by state statute, only planning boards have the ability to accept, reject, approve definitive subdivision plans. That's why this plan is before the planning board.
But without an input from the Historic District?
Well, we do have a member. Again,
That's not the board.
Ed's not the board. He is not the commission. However, projects or individual homes that happen to be within the district, they will go to the Historic District Commission. I know that you want to see the road to be part of that too, but I have to say, as I read Donna's opinion, I think it's not, and this is almost a first for me because she and I are almost lockstep on how we look at things, but I do consider this roadway to be similar to a driveway.
To be clear, you're just nullifying like the right of the Historic District Commission to.
No, we're not.
No,
we're not.
No.
I have no problem with their review, acceptance, or input relative to the roadway because it is in the district. I think, that part's fine.
To look at it and say yes or no?
But yes, they should. That's perfectly fine, but they do not have the ability to accept or reject a definitive subdivision plan. By Mass General Law, that is only the planning board that can do that.
Plus the factor of safety in the fire department weighing in. Again, whatever the Historic District Commission says, it can't change the 22 feet, can't change the location.
Can I quote to you from the historic bylaw? which Donna quotes. She says, "The commission shall not make any recommendation or requirement except for the purpose of preventing developments incongruous to the historic aspects of or the architectural characteristics of the surroundings and of the historic district." Let me repeat it.
Well, you don't need
For
to,
the purpose of preventing developments.
but that's moot. That's not what we're discussing. We can't do that. You want to do that, you bring it up with them, but don't bring it up to us.
Exactly, I'm just saying that it
It's-
should get
it's-
brought up to the historic district.
But the question of the drive cannot be judged by the Historic District Commission, and that's the basis of your argument.
What if they disagree?
It doesn't matter. He's
Well,
above them.
That they
He
can,
can't change, they can't change safety factors.
But that's assuming that it gets approved.
Exactly.
Irrelevant.
But again,
Your
they
argument
don't have
is,
the ability to deny it.
No, you do.
They have
Based
a-
on- Based on a
not-
recommendation from the historic.
oh, okay,
We don't have-
okay.
Yeah.
If you're going to speak, then you should be at the microphone, because we have an,
Let's just both stand up.
I'm just, I mean, I am an attorney. I read this to say the Historic District Commission is not empowered to say yea or nay to a subdivision. They are empowered to prevent incongruous developments in the historic district.
and nobody's proposing any incongruent development in the Historic Commission.
But it's not
There's-
the position, it is not the purview of the planning board to decide what is incongruous. That's why we have a historic district.
There's no
commission.
development being proposed that they govern. There's no house being
house is being
proposed here.
proposed.
So,
Roadways and the way the roadways meet
Well,
the road are.
yes, and they've actually, we went through this 20 years ago.
And we
So-
were here.
That's right. And the road is there now. So clearly, they didn't
It's
feel,
all
they did
changed.
not, may I finish? Clearly, they did not feel that it was incongruous with the character of the neighborhood because they allowed that roadway to be built. So trying to argue that somehow this is now incongruous with the neighborhood is counterintuitive and directly irrelevant because they've already approved it.
Well, I think it's counterintuitive to say that because they approved a 16-foot road, they would therefore approve a 22-foot road.
Look,
They need to have the ability to weigh in.
Plus
So-
side aprons, the
I got
turning
it.
radiuses.
I think we hear it, and I personally, I respect your point of view. I don't think this merits the level of conflict that we're getting into here. If the Historic District Commission wishes to review this and weigh in on it, they're welcome to do so, but we have the governing authority, and so we'll exercise that authority, which way we decide to do so.
Okay, there is a procedure by which the Historic District Commission their approval is sought for a certificate of appropriateness, and it's not an invitation at one of these hearings. It's an application.
Right.
And that's what needs to be done so that your decision it doesn't get appealed at a court. I mean, don't you want to, it's a 2-week process. The Historic District Commission has to respond to an application for a certificate of appropriateness within 14 days. Why wouldn't you do that?
Why didn't they get involved to begin with?
Well, you might ask the applicant.
Well, that's a good,
I'm glad to respond to that. I've done 2 subdivisions, and you all have sat through them with me in excruciating detail. One across the street for the Esdales, which was a non-trivial 15-lot subdivision that never got even mentioned as a concern of the Historic District Commission, and the first 50 feet went through the district. And I also did the one right over here, which is exactly this, well, it's actually less, it's a common driveway thing, and it never came up. And frankly, my reading of the bylaw, which is plain and easy to read, does not bring this up. It does not include fences, it does not include paint, it does not include a lot of things, but it does include the building architecture. And frankly, I think it could be argued that this change doesn't even, that house could be cited, so it is totally outside of the district, which is not my intention, but it could happen because the land behind the Sarfinis, I recall Tom Catalano's, the district is not reasonably interpreted because it bounces in and out depending on whether you were connected or unconnected at the time it was proposed. Gerrymandering is what he called it. So we're glad to live by that with respect to structures. All that fencing that you see, the white fencing that is in front of Chris's house, that I mimicked in exacting detail the one across the street. It never received historic review.
Thank you. Patrick, is it worth checking with Donna on the expansion of this
Sure,
that's
I can-
already in existence? I mean,
I can ask that
might
question.
just clear it up and, see what she has to say.
Sure, I can ask that.
That's a couple days of waiting.
Sure.
Okay.
And
Can you repeat what you're saying?
I just wanted to get an opinion from Donna, the same person they're mentioning from 20 years ago, whether or not she feels an expansion of this roadway warrants, the Historic District Commission looking at it.
Say it again. That's it.
I want an opinion from Donna.
Donna.
Yeah. Whether or not she thinks an expansion of this roadway warrants the Historic District Commission approval. Because that's what, 20 years ago, before this went in, she opined that the Historic District has a purview to look at the road.
She'd be the one to answer it.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I read it differently, and a number of us do, but, we obviously need to take her opinion. But I think that the difference is that the road's there, this is an expansion of it. So if it was new road, obviously, your arguments would weigh a lot more, and it very well may be right, but I just want her thoughts on this expansion.
actually, that would be helpful to the Historic District Commission.
Right.
In determining whether it's something you want to review, is having the town. Again, this is a follow-up to.
I apologize.
This is a follow-up to Brian's request that Donna review whether the expansion of this warrants or would be reviewable or should be reviewed by the Historic District Commission. Will help the Historic District Commission in evaluating and reviewing its potential role.
Her opinion would be very important.
Yeah. So why don't we do that?
Okay. I think that's fair to everybody.
It's an area that isn't well-defined. Historic districts, historic district commissions, how far does their authority, if they actually have any authority, to interpret, is it purely the facial architecture of a building? Or what a roof is covered in and so on?
Yeah.
Our authority doesn't go beyond the front door.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way it reads, with the exemptions from what the Historic District can look at, terraces, walks, driveways, sidewalks, and similar structures, or any one or more of them, provided any such structure is substantially at grade level. To me, I'm not a lawyer, but to me, that would include a roadway.
It would.
But
And you'll forgive me, but I'm entitled to read the regulations and believe them, and I never even considered the Historic Commission on this particular site, nor did I consider them on fences, or when I selected the colors of those houses, or when I chose to turn the yellow house gray.
Right, because they don't have the.
They don't have the authority. So you're entitled to a layman's reading of the bylaw, so I'm reluctant to
We-
open this up. When you say everybody's driveway, which is specifically excluded, is now subject to, I take my frontage off that existing road. That's where That's how my house becomes legitimate.
I don't think we disagree with you, so if you would afford us the opportunity just to get a corroborating opinion. And the other thing, Tom, if you could fashion language about
Yes.
putting something into the deed of no further expansion of that roadway.
Yes, that's fine. I'm glad to do that. And we're also working on the driveway easement because Chris and everybody else has a reason to know what that is, yeah.
So I would guess by our next meeting, we would have an answer.
Well, I certainly hope so, because the Serafinis are holding off the sale of their house in favor of my thing, which has gone on a little long, and whatever you can do. But thank you for all the time tonight. This went on a long time. Appreciate it all.
Rick, as I understand what you just asked is, you're seeing if Mr. Ford would put in writing that no further expansion.
Yeah.
This would be important, but I don't know how enforceable it is, and I'll
It would go into the
Read the
deed.
deeds.
I'll give you an example of it.
Okay.
Twice this board, the planning board, since I've sat on it, have written on plans in Long Meadow Way that no further subdivision or expansion of the properties on Long Meadow Way will take place.
When did that happen?
And the suggested housing developments and so forth that are occupying the times now, those restrictions that this board put on that property are being totally ignored by all the parties.
Just a clarification, Ed. The planning board, when it approved those subdivisions, those were pork chop lots, and under our bylaws, no further subdivision can occur on those lots. There's no building restriction on those lots. And under our Chapter 48, all local zoning is basically thrown out. So they wanted to combine the lots. There's no provision that says they can't recombine the lots. It's a provision said they cannot further subdivide the lots. I just wanted to be clear on that so the public understands what that bylaw is about.
Okay. So we need to, sorry.
I just want to offer it up because it's certainly a talking point here tonight. Please feel free to drive down the road. It's easy enough, and there's a turnaround at the end, and you won't get stuck. And drive back out and see where you end up. Yeah.
Okay. Real quick, please.
Just a legal technicality. We, as abutters, aren't protected by a provision in anybody else's deed that there'll be no more development because they can waive that. So much as, and I do understand and totally agree with what Rick was saying about the pork chop lots, but that's not really what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the threat of a purchase of new property, and 5 years from now, we might be here saying, oh, well, it's another, I'm going to be saying it's another bite at the apple, and everyone else is going to say, oh, no, it's totally new. Now we have all this new land, and the driveway's already there. So what do you care if 15 more houses are dumping out on you? It's already there. That's what I'm trying to protect against as best we can in a note.
And he's already agreed to that.
Yes, but I just want to, from a legal point of view, I want to, what's the best way to implement that to
Goes
protect
into the
us?
deed.
Well, we have no issue putting it on the plan.
Unless it goes to my deed.
We have no issue, well, it can't. We have no issue
Wouldn't go into your
putting a
deed.
note on the plan. Tom
Well,
has
it
no,
could go on my
Tom has
deed
no,
as a,
excuse me, Tom has no issue putting it in the deeds.
Right. But that doesn't protect me, because anyone who
But
owns
that's
those
all you
houses.
can do. That's all we can do.
Well, you can put it on the plan.
I just said.
That gets put on the
But he
I
plan.
said he was
said
gonna
we
do
had no issue putting it on the plan.
Yeah, that's-
And Tom has no issue putting it in the deed.
Right.
So
I just
that's all we can
want
do.
you all to remember in 5 years that we had this conversation.
Well, we're going to memorialize it
In minutes.
legally.
Okay.
It'll be in the minutes.
It'll be on
Just
the
need a-
plan.
And the decision.
We just need a motion to continue this till.
We do meet in
well,
1
we
week.
meet in 1 week, but
Right. The meeting after that is December 4th, if you want to wait.
well, I mean, assuming we can get it up. What's that?
We could be ready in a week.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if we can get the opinion from Donna, which shouldn't be an issue,
I don't think
I
so.
wouldn't think. Meet in a week.
I won't be here in a week. So we still have the numbers.
Now somebody can review the tape.
Yeah, you could avail yourself of what's called the Mullen Rule, which allows you to act on on a decision if you want, so long as you attest to having watched the film and read the minutes.
So I make a motion, we continue the public hearing for the plan submitted, definitive subdivision plan submitted by Engineering Inc. on behalf of Tom Ford to, what's the date?
November 20th.
November 20th.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Take care. So sorry.
Yes.
Patrick, could I talk to you for 1 second after I go?
Water in your
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Yep.
Your office and administration.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
She told me, okay, that the roadway wasn't going to be Charles didn't show up tonight, so she shouldn't make her presentations.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's much longer than that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Everybody's taking a quick break anyway.
I just haven't seen you in so long. She's been here a few weeks ago. She's been here every once in a while. Well, I'm sure you do. It's just been probably 15 years. That's funny because I was reading the decision. Oh, I know. It's just the roadway acceptance.
Okay. Yeah, we can bring it up.
Sweet Jesus, mother of God, I didn't think this would be all that much of a problem.
Right. There are a number of roads that
Yeah, well, I guess I'll go to the men's room if we're having a break.
now we really
consultant, Judy Barrett, cannot make. So they're asking that public forum number 1 take place on Tuesday, February the 5th, and that's our ordinary first meeting of the month, being the first Tuesday of the month. So I wanted to put that before the board and see what members thought about having that as a public forum that night. We could have an alternate meeting for the planning board, or we could start with the planning board ahead of time and take care of ordinary business if you want, or afterwards, whatever folks think is most fitting.
No, I think I mentioned when you and I talked about that we can play it by ear as we get closer to see what will be on the agenda, if there's anything before us, a subdivision or A&R or something like that, whether
Right.
we really need to meet. And if not, I just think it should just take the place of our regular meeting, if there isn't really anything else to do. If there is, then we can have our meeting the following week or
Okay.
before.
So just, if can I jump in?
Please.
Just as a sort of update, we're looking for members of the community to participate in these focus groups. And as we've said before, and just reiterate for those who may be not familiar with this or listening, we're looking for a wide range and diverse viewpoints of all town people, whether they like development or don't like development or would like to see particular kinds of development. We're looking for those focus groups. I think we're looking for at least 8 one-hour focus groups for each of those 2 days, 2 half days.
8 total groups, right?
Yeah, I think
5
that's
people.
it.
About 40 people total.
Yeah, about 40 people. So I generated a preliminary list and sent it to Sean, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, for his review and suggestion to add people. We want to be, get school committee members, the seniors, open space, conservation,
Affordable Housing Trust.
Affordable Housing Trust, any and all people who are interested in expressing their opinions on what they'd like to see in terms of future housing types and locations in the town.
Was anybody on that list just ordinary residents, or was
Yes.
everybody? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And these will be publicly, and as we're doing now, is making this known. And we'll post this on town Facebook and website. We're going to put an article in the Chronicle, as well as for the public meetings where people can come and if they didn't get a chance to do these focus groups, they can come and share their opinions with us. So anyway, we're still waiting for some feedback from various people on the names of people they'd like to see included. And that's not exclusive, so if you know of people you would think that should be on it, or and they don't have to have had previous involvement, we're looking for the broadest base public opinion we can get.
If we send a list of names to Patrick, which I assume what we'd be doing, Patrick, what do you need for information? Name, obviously, but address, phone number, what?
Yes.
Yeah, address,
Contact
telephone
information.
number, email would be useful as well.
Because we'd send them, what, an email invite? or
Yeah.
Yep.
Asking if they're interested?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so if anybody,
And that list should go to you,
Patrick.
Patrick?
Wow.
Okay.
yeah, so if anybody has names they think should be included, please send them to Patrick, and that includes anybody that might be listening on or watching tonight.
Dan has given me a list already. He got right on it.
And he didn't go on the ride.
Okay. Anything else on that? I think we're
I
good.
think that's good for now.
Okay. Thank you. So roadway acceptance policy?
Yeah, as you recall, there's some real concern from the town manager, the DPW director, relative to our roadway acceptance policy. It was generated in 1999, and it basically commits the town to upgrading, doing the engineering, and legal work for 50% of roadway improvements. There's some great concern over the kinds of entirely unanticipated costs that might bring to the town, given the fact that we have a fairly significant amount of drives/roadways here in the town that are privately owned, held, and would have the potential to be upgraded over time. As this board knows, many of the roadways, as you know, we just saw, that was being proposed was intended to be private now and in the future. But what often happens is that residents want to avail themselves of local services, whether it's trash or snow removal, etc. And there's a strong desire to have those roadways that have been previously approved by this board to be private in perpetuity to now become public. Again, that's been a big concern. I have gone through our policy. I've listed out on the chart, which I think I've given to members. Looks like this.
You sent it via email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, excuse me, let me pass it around. It's basically a listing out of the individual elements that our policy requires. As part of the comparison, what I wanted to do is basically compare our community's offering with what other communities do. I will tell you that there are not a lot of other towns out there that even make this offer. You know, I had to do a fair amount of web research just to get 4 other towns that did this. So what I intend to do is look through each of the communities, and Rich Boroff has offered to, and he's already gone through all of the other communities. He and I think, will look through how the other communities compare with what we offer and what they do or don't, to give us a better understanding of, you know, what's out there with other communities, just so we have an ability to tell town meeting and or the selectman and town manager, you know, whether or not to continue with having this policy or not.
So, just a clarification, so would this include not having a policy and say there will be no acceptance of private roads?
That's definitely a potential outcome. Again, if the Board of Selectmen see it as being appropriate to cease that policy, which I don't think it's ever been employed since it got created in 1999. You know, not only is it onerous to the town, it's onerous to the landowners too. They have to do half of or an as-built. They have to do, part of the engineering. They have to dedicate land to it, and all of that goes on them as well. So, this is not an easy process. This is why roads that need to be public, they should be public, and they need to start out public if they're roads that have public merit to them. By that I mean roads that are through roads that are important for safety, access purposes, commerce, all of those kinds of things, which is why we create them. But a lot of private roadways don't fall under that sort of categorization that merit public investment, if you will. So that's really where we want to end up, is understanding, should we continue it or not?
Comments to that? Actually, I remember there were two occasions, and a bunch of us were available. One was that.
Yeah, it's come up recently.
Essex
It's
Street.
come up, yeah, it's come up.
Yeah, that came up, and then there was a real small one off of Sagamore or Gardner or something, and it was a short drive with a circle at the end. I think there were 4 houses on it, and that had a legal encumbrance built into the whatever, that it would never become a public way.
Right.
So, but I've gone through, like Patrick said, do you want, I can give you a quick summary of some of this stuff. Do you want it now, or?
Let's get everything together. Let's get this filled out, and we can do that next time.
Excellent. The dregs.
Just have it all kind of in one, and just do it next time, and give
Uh,
everybody a
you
chance
want-
to review it. and-
You want everybody to fill it out?
No. I guess I was thinking that you and Patrick were going to kind of,
Well, I've done it, so.
okay.
Patrick and I were going to sit down and each do half, but I've done the whole thing.
Okay.
Well, I think there's sort of a larger policy question here is, do we think, we can get in the minutia, do we think that the town should have a road acceptance policy? I mean, that's the big question here.
I think it should to protect us, and I think the problem with.
No. I think you're missing what I'm getting at is our recommendation could be no new road acceptance of private ways.
Right.
So no policy. The policy is no private roads are accepted, period. End of story. No need for any guidelines.
Okay, but I wasn't sure what you meant. If you meant no, see, there's 2 different ways to accept the road. One is when it's as it's built, and the second is 20 X number of years after it's been built.
Right.
Okay, which one are you referring to?
If it's built as a private way or a private road, private driveway, or however you would like to define the access and entry point for a number of houses, is designated originally private, then the planning board could recommend that they stay that way and that there be no acceptance of any new public roadways that were previously private. End of story.
Yeah, I understand.
No need for any kind of
Yep.
policies or procedures.
I think that's one reasonable track to take.
So I think that's a big question. So we could sit here and debate, gee, we want to put
But then,
all these protections
if you
in.
do that, either way, you have to set up a mechanism to make sure those streets get repaired, and there's part of the problem.
Do we?
Because if you don't,
Can I ask a question?
yeah,
And I want to ask that of, do we need to have, and if they're private roads, do we need to have a policy for them being repaired?
what if we send
Because
that
if we-
big 70-ton truck down there and it breaks an axle? Who's responsible?
The private landowner.
Who haven't kept up the maintenance of their roadway.
Okay, so.
That's why they have a homeowners association insurance.
Okay, But what if they don't have homeowners association insurance?
Then they're writing a check.
Yeah, amongst the group.
So does that mean, and I'm asking this as devil's advocate, because basically I see this as a real problem. Does that mean you then may have to go to court to get the money from these people?
Possibly.
Yeah, but when has that happened?
Pardon?
When has it happened?
When has it happened?
I mean, here. I mean,
It
have you seen it?
hasn't, but I'm just going, what if?
No, I get it. You can say that to a lot of different things. And, you know, so
But that's also part of being part of a homeowners association, just like a condo association. You have a right on you have an obligation to take care of the common areas, and you share in that burden, but that burden comes a liability.
Okay.
And it needs to be super clear because we've waffled in the past on plowing certain private ways.
Yeah.
Well, and
So-
that's where the conundrum comes in, because the town, for, I'm sure altruistic reasons, decided to plow a private road with all good intentions, and then it became, sort of grandfathered in, and it creates a snowball effect, oh, well, you've done all this work, and so now you really should take over and maintain the road.
Right.
Well, so I think it's a policy decision we ought to think about before we go diving in.
And it's not just us.
Right. No, I mean, we would make a recommendation, to the Board of Selectmen. It's pretty, as Patrick said, and I have no reason to disbelieve you, Patrick, that it's a rarity of 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth that if there's only a dozen that do this, well, there's a reason for that. It imposes a significant potential burden and liability on the town.
Absolutely.
So, I did a quick review of this, and the one that sort of stuck out was the one in Canton that basically said, if you want to do this, you're going to pay 100% of all the costs, period.
Right.
So, okay, that may be one way to go.
Right.
So I think, and it's a very nicely written, very clearly and articulated policy that said, here's how you do it. But you're going to be responsible for all the legal, engineering, design, and construction costs.
That's right. And ours says 50%.
No, I understand that.
Which puts us at a big
Right.
So that may
problem.
be, so you could either say no, or you could say sure,
100%.
but you're going to pay the entire cost, which I think in essence is going to be a barrier to 99.9% of,
Right.
homeowners associations or
Because-
Yeah.
subdivisions.
Yeah, depending on the road, but you have to assume that the cost of doing that, if it wasn't done right in the first place, the cost of doing that is going to more than outweigh any added services they're going to get from the town.
Right.
The other part of the problem is, how do you enforce it? The uptake of the maintenance of the road, and I'm thinking of Berrywood, because that was the one that came before us, and it's in miserable condition.
Right.
That is a prime example of they're not taking care of it.
Right.
The other part of it is, what is the status of Cutler Road, the part of it that is dirt?
That's a public road.
That's a public road. Okay. Because,
It's like Chabaco is.
yeah, and there was a time when the town had some money and got a chance to pave that, and the...
But that's a public road, so that doesn't fit into this.
Town voted against it.
Well, the abutters fought it like hell.
Yeah.
And threatened to
they
sue. That's a whole other question.
irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's
right?
irrelevant.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
irrelevant, right?
That's what I want to make sure.
So,
That's what I want to do.
so I just throw that out as a sort of like,
I'm in agreement with you, Rick. It's one of the two things, and not the 50%. So we have to do something about the present bylaw, and the question is, what do we do with it?
I mean, honestly,
So, in reading the bylaw, though, the bylaw requires that every abutter on that road participate, number one, and they participate in one of two ways, either by lot size or by frontage size. So that means if you have a 200-foot frontage and I have a 100-foot frontage, I'm gonna say yes, and you're gonna say no way,
Yeah.
right? So I think we're a little bit more protected than
right,
we appear to be because of that alone.
yeah. No, that's
why
good.
Berrywood fell through was because there was one butter who either wasn't available or said no.
Right, so I think this is just really cleaning it up.
Yeah.
Because it's poorly written. I mean, if you look at the other communities' bylaws, they're, other than Dedham, which is sort of a question and answer,
No, that's.
they're very.
That was, yeah, Dedham, you're right, that was an FAQ.
They're very specific about the procedure, and it says, you know, within 120 days, within, you know, 90 days. It gives them a step-by-step procedure that if we're going to retain that, we ought to at least clean it up so that somebody can read it and go, okay, here's the process, here's the costs, and here's the timeline that, you know, is entailed in making this happen. A question? Was it the Board of Selectmen that thought this was something that we should be reviewing? How did this come to us?
The genesis of this came about by the DPW director talking to me, in that he has had multiple individuals from various private roads around town who, you know, are expecting snow removal.
I got it.
And, you know.
So at present, does he say no unless it's a publicly accepted road?
There has been sort of a mixed delivery, I think you could say. I think that they've tried to do as much as they can based on their resources for the purpose of having public safety access during times of snow.
Right.
But, you know, that hasn't been 100% as I understand it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So what do we do with this?
So what we do with this is, you know, we finish our review. We need to evaluate the planning board's stance on it. Should we continue it? Should we eliminate it? What's our recommendation? One of the important distinctions that I need to make is that this is a set of, it's called procedures. This is not a bylaw.